All right. So as we sort of wrap up with our conversation and just our time with liberal Protestantism in America, I thought it'd be helpful to have a good case study that utilizes our framework of religious myth and ritual and how we're looking at how um, this concept of religion, as we talk about, again, how people connect with the unseen order of the universe and trying to harmonize with it and using myths and rituals as a means in which that actually takes place. I think that for our our topic with Protestant Christianity, particularly the liberal wing of Protestant Christianity, really one of the best ones is called the social gospel. And the social gospel was touched on in your book. Catherine Albanese touches on it and gives a little bit of the historical background with it, but I wanted to kind of point to some more specifics with it and really talk about how this is a great example of myth and ritual coming together to form and reinforce identity within a religious group. And so, one of the ways in which that happens is, again, through looking at the religious groups in a particular time period, looking at how does a religious group respond to um, the changes in culture, economy, politics, those kinds of things. And as we talked about in the last session, we looked at how uh, the modernist impulse of American liberal Protestantism in particular, and how a lot of these Protestants and these mainline denominations embraced modernist ideas of science and scientific theories of like evolution, as well as changing how they approach the Bible. How did they think about the Bible? How did they study the Bible using higher criticism as opposed to more conservative and traditional means of viewing the Bible as God's literal word? Okay, and so with that change and with that kind of cultural milieu, as we would say, we have the introduction of the social gospel. And so, as liberal Protestants started to look around at what was going on in America during this time, you have to remember this is the late 1800s, the late 19th century. And economically, the world is changing and America is changing. It's very industrious, and there are, again, there's part of the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century. You have lots of factories, manufacturing, and what we see through a lot of that is a lot of inequality, injustices taking place, child labor. Um, there were really no unions at this time to protect people. And basically, there was this discrepancy between um, uh, those who owned and ran the companies versus those who worked in the factories and worked in the fields and performed the hard labor. And so there was a lot of economic inequality. There was poverty, alcoholism, crime, racial tensions, child labor issues, lack of education. And a lot of these liberal Christian leaders said, hey, we need to apply the ethics of the Bible to these social ills. We need to deal with poverty, inequality, child labor, racism, those kinds of things. And we're going to base this off of Jesus's teachings in the gospel accounts, and specifically the Lord's Prayer, where in Matthew 6, chapter 10, it says, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And a lot of these liberal pastors and leaders within these liberal Protestant traditions, they started to form organizations to deal with these social ills. And they're like, look, and for us, we need to take what Jesus taught and apply it in real life. That it's more than just a belief about something, but it needs to actually be lived out of. And so what you see is, again, this word myth, right? We're not saying that something is untrue, but the word that we're using for our context literally means it's a way of for people to connect with the unseen order of the universe, or to have a narrative about the unseen order of the universe. And so we talk about the Bible as a narrative. It's really, or the Bible as a myth, it's a story, it's a narrative that talks about God's dealings with his people and God's dealings with, you know, his creation. And irregardless of their views about, the creation narrative and whatnot, if it's literal or allegorical, they were looking at this going, this is something, in the teachings of Jesus, this could be really, really helpful, which is why Jesus taught it in the first place, is what they surmised. And so they would, they started to take Jesus' teachings and going, we need to live out of this. We need to do something with it. And so out of that came what they would call the social gospel. Rather than talking about what people needed to believe in order to, quote, be saved or to be part of the church, they thought, you know what, we just need to bring these teachings to the masses. And the only way we can do that is not to stand up and just preach about them, but it's to set up different organizations, set up charities, set up movements that really addressed these social ills in the United States at this time. And so they started to do that. And you can see this progress. And what was interesting about this movement is that it had a lot of traction from a lot of clergy leaders and pastors and ministers. It didn't really gain too much traction with the laity or regular congregants, but a lot of these leaders set up organizations to deal with labor laws, setting up charities to help those who were financially and economically less fortunate, and people who were dealing with different hardships. They were able to provide for them, and they really felt that they were embodying those teachings of Jesus, where he's going, no, you have to go help people, you have to go clothe people, you have to feed people. Again, by doing that, you are ushering in the kingdom of God, that this is the manifestation of that, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And so there was this belief that by doing these things, they were furthering what God wanted to do, but they were doing it through social initiatives, that it was more than just believing the right things, but it was about going and doing the right things. And so we see this continue on even up through the modern day. And a lot of this started to shape even economic practices and politics. And there are connections between the social gospel movement and later on, economic and social policies, and like the New Deal from FDR and those kinds of things. And so you can see those traced out in more detail, throughout the last 100 plus years, 120 years now. But that became kind of a lasting legacy up through the modern day with liberal Protestants, is this need for social change, social movement, that, in our current political and economic climate, you still see a lot of charitable organizations that have ties to mainline liberal Protestant denominations. You see hospitals set up, either run by the Presbyterian Church, PCUSA, or, a lot of other different denominations have started like hospitals and different things like that, and different organizations, in order to continue to address in the long run, social ills and people who need assistance. And so that became very much the hallmark um, of liberal Protestant traditions that continues on through today. And so again, you see that with, if you happen to study and take a look at, you know, issues of racism and systemic racism, and discussions about gender inequalities, oftentimes from the religious camps, it's the liberal mainline Protestant leaders who are advocating for social justice in those circles, whereas more fundamentalist, or um, nowadays evangelical, what they would call conservative evangelicals. There are some voices in that discussion, but really it's the focal point is more from um, the liberal Protestant traditions. And so, again, what we see here again is rituals born out of um, mythic narrative, right? And so, this idea that you have um, the Bible, and again, not because it mandates a um, a ritual per se, but rituals. When we talk about rituals, again, they're not just mindless things that people do in a religious context, but rituals can be, um, like I said, caring for those in need. So starting like a soup kitchen or a closed donation center, where every week, the same day each week, or the same day every day, people are able to come in and participate and receive a meal, receive clothing, receive some sort of financial assistance, whatever it may be. That becomes ritual. That's a ritual because it's starting to happen on a regular basis, and it's allowing people to what? Connect with the unseen order. So in this case, it would be connecting um, with Jesus Christ and God, right? And so you have all of that. Um, again, this kind of connection there, and again, much like what we've seen with other religious traditions, right, where the the myth, the narrative, informs the ritual, and how they come together to create identity, right? And we saw this, with the remember and re hyphen membering of the Dakota 38 ride in the film you watched a couple weeks ago. And so, again, those are just really helpful examples, and hopefully helps you to kind of wrap your mind around what this looks like, and seeing how this concept of religion, myth, and ritual plays out in real life, plays out in daily lives for people. And we hope that, again, you're seeing this lived religious experience in America from these different perspectives. And even though they are different religious traditions, my hope as your instructor is that you are able to kind of see how this is all played out, and using this theoretical framework that we've constructed for this course, that you can actually see how it frames up in a lot of different religious traditions, that we've been able to use it now for Native American religious traditions, Roman Catholicism, Judaism in America, and now liberal Protestantism. And of course, we're going to see this next week when we talk about the more fundamentalist and evangelical forms of Protestant traditions, and what that looks like both historically but also into the modern day, and how it shapes how a lot of people think about the world around them, and it shapes politics, it shapes social action, those kinds of things. So I hope this was, this brief little case study was kind of helpful, just a short little explanation of it. Again, you can read more about it in your textbook, and you can, look at the references as well if you're interested in learning more about it. But, again, this is it's a helpful case study that the social gospel is using a religious text, a religious mythic narrative, to inform action, and thus creating a kind of new sociological framework and new sociological grouping of people known as people who participate in the social gospel. So, yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. But I hope that this has been helpful for you.